I didn't know what was going on with Jill. Couldn't see a thing. She fell and screamed, and I'd popped around and seen her half under the track. Then the spider mind shifted, and I had to leap back. Now I didn't dare show myself. I'd get us both killed. I thought Jill would have finished by now. I'd bet money she wouldn't lose her nerve. Either she was still waiting for an opening, or something had gone wrong. Then I heard the heavy thud and metal scraping sound that could only be the hook dropping under the train. It bounced up and down, over and over, while I waited and waited and waited for that big mother with the brain and the legs to be yanked into oblivion. What happened next was so stupid and unlikely. It was like crapping out 10 times in a row. The damned hook bounced up and hooked onto the train itself. The little voice in the back of my head I hadn't heard from recently chose this moment to speak to me in the voice of an old kid's science show. "So, Flynn, what have we learned from today's experiment?" "Well, Mr. Wizard, we've learned that if the train is moving at the same speed as the spider bastard, absolutely nothing will happen." I humped back hand over hand, ducking down to check under the train, looking for the hook. Saw it. I slid through the train's shock absorbers. Time for more help from the nuns. If we hit a bump, the shocks would slice me in half. Suddenly, the train itself seemed like one of the monsters. I made it through, then slid along the undercarriage on my back, across the covered axles under the train, until I could reach the flippin' hook. The damned thing was caught on an able. I reached for the sucker and succeeded in touching it. Yup, there it was. Touching it was a cinch. I could touch it all I wanted without falling onto the track and being ground to hobo stew. Getting it loose was the problem. Once upon a time, I won a trophy in junior high gymnastics. There were only 5 of us, but I was the best in that class. I thought I was pretty hot stuff that day. It looked to be the moment for an encore performance. I went looser with the legs, increasing the possibility of falling, but giving me a longer reach. I didn't want to perform this trick more than once. Not only did this stunt run the risk of my becoming part of the track, there was the extra worry of losing the duck gun dangling precariously from my back. Not having my weapon could be as close to a death sentence as getting run over by the little train that could. I got my hand around the hook, heaved, and yanked it free. I did a war whoop worthy of a Comanche. Then I shut my eyes. I hate the sight of my own bloody, mangled corpse, and dropped the thing to the ground. This time, the law of averages was enforced by the probability police. The hook caught on a spar and held. I gripped my perch and braced for impact. I clenched my whole body as the webbing tightened. Then, the freaking stuff broke. It wasn't supposed to do that. The end whimped like an enraged snake, lashing across my back. But I didn't let go. I waited for the sound of that massive body being yanked to its doom. Still, there was plenty of nothing. This was becoming irritating. But there was something. Despite the howling of the wind and the machine pounding of steel wheels on steel rails, I heard a high, piping squeal. It sounded like a scream from hell. As I began clambering back through the shocks and up the side of the train, I heard explosions. Something was happening. I climbed faster, to be greeted by the scene of the steam demon shooting its missiles at the spider mind. The latter was at a disadvantage, listing as it moved, badly off balance. The webbing had tore one leg off the monstrosity. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what happened next. Losing a leg would put the spider mind in a bad mood. It wouldn't be philosophical about it. No, it would fire a burst from its guns at the only target in sight, the Steam Demon. For all their power, these guys had a weakness as deep as the ocean. Conquerors and masters need some self-control. My primary goal now was to find Jill and get her out of here, but I didn't see her from this angle. She was probably still hugging the other side of the flat car, where she had lassoed the Spider-Mind's leg. The train hit a bad bump, exactly the impact that would have left me beside myself when I was doing my Tarzan of the Shocks routine. The two monsters took the bump personally and increased the ferocity of the battle. I realized the high piping sound was from the spider. It probably made the noise when it lost its leg. The Steam Demon emitted more human-sounding screams. The wind seemed to be picking up, but neither contestant paid any attention to the weather. As I watched the Spider-Mind tear up the Steam Demon with a non-stop barrage from the Gatling gun, I remembered how difficult Arlene and I had found taking one of these down before. The demon was nothing compared to the other. But if there were a cosmic bookie keeping tabs on this one, the final decision was still in doubt. The Steam Demon followed the optimum strategy for his position, firing missile after missile at the robot exterior of the Spider-Mind's brain. Cracks were beginning to appear. I stayed put, praying for the best possible outcome. By the time the Spider-Mind's brain case finally exploded, the Steam Demon was so ripped it could barely stand. Under the circumstances, things were working out better than the original plan. After all, if the Spider-Mind had been eliminated as intended, we would still have had to contend with the problem of the Steam Demon. While I was congratulating myself on the turn of events, the train took a sudden turn, and the tottering, cybernetic creature nearly fell off the flat car. That would have been the perfect climax to the Duel of the Titans. Dawn started to streak the horizon, with a sickening shade of green. The improved light made it much easier to pick out details of the local terrain, such as the high rock gorge we were just then passing over, thanks to a narrow bridge. This would be a splendid place for the Steam Demon to take its final rest. The perfect end, as I had already thought, to the perfect battle. Then I could find Jill and congratulate her on a mission well done. The only flaw in this scenario consisted of a single claw. The claw the Steam Demon used to grab hold and save itself as it fell right next to me. Right next to me! It was bad enough seeing the demon this close up. Far worse, it saw me. As weak and near death as the thing was, it recognized a living human a few inches away. Very slowly, it raised its missile hand. It was slow. I was a whole lot faster. I backdrew my double-barreled shotgun and fired both barrels, one-handed, squeezing both triggers simultaneously. Quite a kick. The blast tore off its entire hand at the wrist, the gripping hand. The Steam Demon plummeted off the car to the ground, exploding noisily as it got off one last missile shot that went straight up through the track ahead of the train, in between the rails, right on a curve in the bridge. The train didn't bother slowing as it rolled over the missile-damaged point. I could imagine a cartoon demon with an engineer's cap, throwing back a shot of the good old hooch and not worrying about the condition of the track ahead. As we passed, I saw in greenish daylight growing brighter by the minute that part of the inside rail was bent up from the blast. If it had been on the outside rail instead, it would have plunged into the gorge. The president of the 12 would have needed to audition a new act. "Jill!" I howled. "Jill!" Climbing up to the flat car was easy, but I suddenly had a cramp deep in my back. It was so bad that it paralyzed me for a moment. I wouldn't let something like that stop me now. I twisted around trying to loosen up, still calling, "Jill! Jill!" Where the hell was that kid? I was starting to worry. I reached the end of the flat car and looked down and saw her there, gazing up at me with wide eyes. "You all right?" She nodded, but not a word came out. Maybe she was suffering from shock. I reached down and she took my hand. I didn't care about the twinge in my back now. I hauled her up. "Great," I said. "Alive?" "Of course." "Oh." She still seemed not entirely sure. I grabbed and hoisted her. Now my back felt fine, and for a crazy moment the sicko green dawn looked beautiful. I put her down. The mummy and we were alone on the flat car now. A warm glow spread through me, not unlike the warm jet of a hot tub. My old voice spoke, something good for once. "The debt is nearly paid." "What debt?" "Oh, the debt of my stupidity in bringing assault onto the Enclave. That debt." "Wait here." I could have sent her up the ladder to signal the others to join us, but she had earned a rest as far as I was concerned. Her vacation from hell might not last more than a few minutes, but I wanted her to enjoy every second before I ordered her to face death yet again. I got them myself, bringing them to the cacophonous flat car. Arlene and Albert looked as exhausted as Jill, and as tired as I felt. Next time, we'd fly. Arlene bent over and began unwrapping, revealing the face of another human in a world where being human was something special. Huddling against the 40 or 50 km/h wind that leaked around the engines in the air dam ahead of us, remnants of the 300 km/h hurricane, 2 meters either left or right, we crouched over our mummy, staring. We saw the features of a black man, mid-30s. As we shifted him around on the platform, I estimated his weight at about 64 kilos. Not a bad weight for 1.7 meters. "What done him?" Jill shouted. A good question, though I could barely hear her small voice over the roar of train and wind. Computer and electronic jacks were all over his flesh, stuck like pins into a doll. He was unconscious. There were so many jacks he'd probably be in extreme pain if awake. Arlene pulled the lid back from his right eye, revealing a cloudy white orb, so completely glazed over that you couldn't make out a pupil. Even after encountering a who's who of monsters, fiends, and other denizens of hell, something really bothered me about seeing this helpless man before me. He didn't reek like sour lemons, thank God. He was no zombie. I still hadn't discussed with Jill or Albert what Arlene and I had mulled over. Namely, the possibility that the bad guys were trying for more perfect human duplicates. Practice makes perfect. We had no idea how the zombies were created. Sometimes I thought they really were the reanimated dead, but other times I could buy the idea that they were transformed while still alive. However the enemy was doing it, the lemon stink was a byproduct of dealing with real human bodies. If the enemy ever made perfect human copies from scratch, there would be no lemon smell, or anything else to give them away. Arlene tried various methods of waking up a man, even slapping him in the face, but nothing worked. She looked at me and shrugged. Jill reached out and gingerly touched one of the jacks, sticking out from the man's flesh. She managed to look crafty and thoughtful, even with her red hair whipping around her face like a brush fire. She fingered the jack again and scowled. Then Jill looked at me and mimed typing on a keyboard. She raised her eyebrows. What? I blinked. Light finally dawned on Marblehead. She wanted to hack this guy's brain. Well, why the hell not? We all crowded around the mummy, making a windbreak for Jill. Leaning so close I could actually make out a few words.
Need Jack. Find out what. Wants to fight. Can't promise it'll. Might be the break.
I couldn't hear everything, but I got the gist of it. The real question was what on earth was inside that brain that was worth the protection of a spider mind and a handful of steam demons. Back on Phobos and Deimos, the alien technology we had seen was different. Biological somehow. They used cyborgs, combination biological, mechanical, like the spider mind itself. Was that what this dude was? Some sort of link between humans and alien technology? Or the other way around? Well, whatever. We weren't gonna find out anything in a wind tunnel. Somehow, some way, we simply had to get this guy off the damned train. Somehow I doubted we could just ring the bell and say, next stop, conductor. I hoped the cyber mummy would be enough of a son of a bitch to join us when we unwrapped him. Vacation over! I bellowed over the gale. War on! Arlene gave me a dirty look, so I knew that the awesome responsibility of command still rested on my shoulders. The man seemed physically manhandled and bruised, but not seriously damaged, except for their attempt to transform him into an appliance. The question was, how would we get him off the train? If we waited until we rolled into the station in LA, I could imagine a slight difficulty in persuading a large contingent of, say, steam demons into helping us with our cargo. The absence of the spider mind from the flat car would take a bit of explaining as well. We lacked the firepower to make our argument completely convincing.
Suggestion,
rumbled Albert. It was hard to pick out his words. The timbre of his voice was too close to the throb of the engines, and he wasn't a good shouter. No practice, probably. I only caught some of what he said and wasn't too sure about what I did catch.
Father, trains. Trick or treat. Jill's age. Incorrect car. Aggravates. Emerging brake.
I stared, trying to parse the incomprehensible plan. Trick or treat. Jill's age aggravates the emerging brake. Or was that brake? Emergency brake? Something about an emergency brake? He tried again.
Couple of cars.
He hollered.
Couple car.
Couple of cars. Cars? No, car. Couple car. I smacked my forehead. Decouple the car. Which must activate, not aggravate, the emergency brake. Jesus and Mary. What a nightmare. A loud one. That seemed like a plenty good plan to yours truly. Hauling the mummy up to the semi-protected roof, we staggered overhead toward the last car. That's the one we would decouple. The train was going as fast as before, but we humped a lot faster along the roof this time. Killing the spider mind and steam demon worked wonders for our self-confidence. Jill's attitude was so changed that I could probably dangle her over the edge, holding on to her ankles, without her showing a quiver, though I was glad we didn't require such a demonstration. There were 3 cattle cars, which we had to pass by creeping along the sides, centimeters away from staring zombies. I thought for sure they'd start shooting at us. What a time to die. At least the demons wouldn't keep their mummy. But the reworked humans merely stared with malignant stupidity. They'd been given no orders, you see. Just like bureaucrats at the Pentagon. When we reached the last car, an enclosed cargo car, I looked down through the slatted roof to see that the interior was stuffed with zombies, as expected. Albert slid down between the cars in search of the emergency decoupler. After checking it, he climbed back up and shouted,
When?
Another good question. We didn't want to be stuck in the middle of the desert. If we hung until the suburbs of LA, we should be able to hold our own combat-wise and be close enough to supplies, shelter, and other transportation. I tried to remember the LA geography.
Riverside!
I shouted. That is assuming the train passed through Riverside. If not, any eastern bedroom community would do. Seeing was considerably easier in the daylight, even in the pale green light. For the moment, I didn't even mind the greenish hue of an alien sky. Get rid of these damned invaders, and we could look up at the natural color of blue, minus the gray haze for which LA was famous. It would take a lot of work increasing the population to get everything back to normal, but it would be a satisfying challenge.
Single!
Hollered Albert. Why was he telling me that?
Single and couple.
Oh, whoops. Signal when he should decouple the car. He climbed back down. Arlene tossed me a faint nod and half smile, then gingerly slithered down the ladder and joined him.